why don't we get started? And if you want to, you can introduce yourself in the chat and what you're hoping to get out of the webinar today. All right, thank you for joining us for our first webinar, Prepare Your Nonprofit Organization for a Website Redesign, Where to Start. My name is Emily Risch, and I'm a Business Development and Project Manager at Indie Tech Solutions. I'll be moderating the panel today. We are very excited to share information on how to help you prepare for your website redesign. At Indie Tech Solutions, we work exclusively with nonprofit organizations nationwide. We specialize in providing custom web solutions that align with the unique needs and requirements of our partners. We've designed about 100 websites since we opened our doors 8 years ago, and we're very proud of our current work with our ongoing partners, where we provide web support, security, and maintenance. As a web development agency, we believe in the power of equality and diversity to drive innovation and create meaningful change. Our team of talented professionals comes from diverse backgrounds and areas of expertise, enabling us to bring fresh and innovative perspectives to every project we undertake. For the format today, we're going to start with a panel discussion, and then we will move to Q&A. You can add your questions to the Q&A section at any time. Now, let me introduce the Indie Tech Solutions team. We'll start with Seth. Seth Jacobs is the Director of Digital Strategy. With over 16 years of experience, Seth's passion is empowering nonprofits to leverage their digital properties to maximize their reach and best serve their audiences. He is a champion of smart, agile, and efficient project management and sound, holistic digital strategy, and loves sharing these skills with ITS nonprofit partners. Now I'll introduce Catalina. Catalina Seoane is a Uruguayan web designer with over 10 years of expertise in web and user interface user experience design. Catalina creates designs that are both aesthetically pleasing and highly functional. She is passionate about her skills to make the world a more beautiful and user-friendly place, and she is continually learning and growing in her field. And Wasim Sadella is a Chief Information Officer and founder of Indie Tech Solutions. With over 18 years of experience creating innovative web solutions for nonprofits, he leads Indie Tech Solutions web strategy, development, and team members to help numerous nonprofits achieve their digital goals, positively impacting their communities. With a background in web security, he ensures that all of Indie Tech Solutions web projects are developed with the highest level of security in mind. Wasim founded Indie Tech Solutions driven by his unwavering passion and dedicated to nonprofit causes. Now that we're done with the introductions, let's dive into the questions. Before we get into where to start with the website redesign, the first question is a very basic but important one. Wasim, why don't you kick us off? What are the benefits of a website redesign? Why should an organization consider updating their website to begin with?
Thanks so much, Emily, and hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday, and thanks for joining. Yeah, that's the main question of this webinar or of this panel, and we'll try to share with all of you best practices and our experience working on a lot of website redesigns in the last 8 to 9 years. So number one question is like why any organization will need a website redesign. And I just want to take like maybe 20 seconds to talk about the word redesign or the verb redesign, because sometimes people will call it redesign, overhaul, sometimes revamp, all like almost the same thing with a slightly small difference. Each organization is different and your website or web presence needs are unique, but we identified like 3 main reasons why any organizations will need a website redesign and why it makes sense or it's beneficial for the organization. Number one, like almost every website redesign project we worked on, people will come to us and say our website is outdated either visually, like it looks like from the 90s, or outdated the tone, the voice of the website, the branding does not reflect what the organization is doing, either because there is like a new direction for the organization and the website does not reflect that. So that's like number one, is the outdated look and feel and brand. Number two is it's kind of like it's funny but not funny, is people come to us almost all the time and say our visitors cannot find anything on our website. Like they search for days and they can't find our anything on our website, so they use Google to search to come to our website. And even worse, when your personal, like when your team can't find anything on your website. So that's related to kind of like content strategies. Like everything over the years, a lot of organizations, they just like throw content on their website and they need a revamp for that. And third one, which is a combination of a few things, including it's either hacked, like so security concerns. It's very slow because over the years, once again, different people work on that project on the website and it just got slow. And sometimes like just like it takes so much time to update the website because the back end is a mess. So more like the functional functionality is needed for a website redesign. Those like there are like a lot of other reasons, but those like three like top reasons we believe like any organization should consider or think about a website redesign.
Thanks, Wasim.
Mhm.
This next question is for Seth. With the complexity of a website redesign, preparation is key. Seth, as the project lead, what should an organization be thinking about before they dive into the process?
Hi, thanks, Emily. And thanks everybody for joining as well. It's a great question. I think that, it's so often assumed when we're working with nonprofits, that like, I'm going to be speaking as, hypothetically, if we're working together with a nonprofit, it's so often assumed that that nonprofit, that the firm is going to be doing like all the work, all the heavy lifting. And that's true. But there are generally a few things that nonprofits can do before the process starts to help set them up for success. Because their participation, like active collaboration in the project, is such an important piece of this. I'll let Wasim and Catalina speak to some of the more specific pieces you might need to start thinking about ahead of time. But starting more broadly from a strategy standpoint, I think thinking about your team and bandwidth on that front, the timeline and the budget are three really good ways that you can get started on the right track. So if we're taking that moment to ask ourselves about these things before we get started, some of those questions are about the people, right? Like who are the key participants on the nonprofit side of things that are going to be participating throughout the process? Because it is going to take some time, right? It is going to take some resources from from the nonprofit side of things. So on that front, we probably need a primary point of contact. Who's that going to be? Is it the comms director? Is it a digital strategist on the team? Who's going to keep things moving? Who's going to keep making sure that, that frankly us are being held accountable and we're getting our work done, and that the other key members of your team are getting their work done too, and that the project's moving along smoothly. And, if things come up, who do we turn to, right? Like who are we going to come to for you all when we have questions or updates, et cetera. And then of course, like, who's the decision maker? Who is ultimately making the call about some of these things? That might be, an executive director. It might be a comms director as well. So who that person is definitely depends on the nonprofit. And that can take a lot of different forms too. But identifying that person early on, or those people early on, can really help establish the flow and make sure that the process doesn't get held up because we went so far in one direction, but we didn't actually get the okay from, say, the ED or somebody. And so we got to kind of take a big step back and go back to the drawing board because we went down a path that they didn't like. And then, on a more day-to-day basis, who are going to be our regular reviewers? If we have, say, a graphic designer on the staff that might have a particular interest in how the website looks and feels, How often are we going to be having them check in? We ourselves often meet weekly with our nonprofit partners when we're going through a web design, a redesign. And so, making sure, recognizing like who is going to be in those regular meetings or what point in the process are we checking in. Having sort of those key people laid out is a really, really important part of the process and something you can start thinking about now. So then there's the timeline, right? Like the timeline is such an important part of the process because it lets us know really how long we have to work on the project. If it's a 3-week project, right, that's a far different thing than say a 3 or 6 or 9 month project. I would say, generally speaking, the more time, the better. That lets you really dive deep into some of the initial like discovery phases, make sure that like we really have everything sorted out. It lets us go through sort of more design iterations, and it lets us really dive deep into the project. Realistically, it's probably going to be a little bit shorter. So, it kind of just depends on, what's your ideal timeline and what's your realistic timeline, because at least on our side of things, like we're super flexible. But with that said, the one thing that you do really need to keep in mind is if there are any hard deadlines, because that's something that we need to know before launching too, right? Is like, say we have an important annual meeting in the fall where we're doing a big fundraising drive and we want to use the website to really talk that up. That's something we need to know from the outset so we can say, okay, well, these are our milestones. This is when we need to hit them in order to reach that anticipated deadline. And last, the deadline or the timeline really does have an effect on the budget, which is that dreaded B word that nobody wants to talk about, but everybody needs to. If the timeline is a little bit tighter, at least on our side of things, that usually means that we need to reallocate some resources, front load the project a little bit more, which does typically lead to an increase in cost. A lot of times on the nonprofit side of things, funding is an issue. So we've seen people tackle that in a couple different ways. Thinking about what is your funding source, right? Like, are you going to be working with your development team? Maybe you could launch a campaign saying, hey, we're under construction, we're going through an overhaul and we need your help, something like that. We've also seen it as a capital expense, right? Like just like your plumbing or your internet, your website is part of your organization's infrastructure and can be thought about that way as well. And if budget is a concern, consider breaking up the project into phases. We're really flexible on that front. We don't mind saying, okay, well, this is what's our need to haves, this is what's our nice to haves, and those nice to haves we can kind of put a little bit down the line. And we can talk about that, cross that bridge when we get to it once we've secured a little bit more funding. So all of these things together can not only create a good scope of work or an RFP, which I'll talk about, I think, a little bit later on, but it'll also get your team on the same page and start off on the right foot once the project does get started.
All right, thanks, Seth. So let's get into design. Catalina, how should an organization looking for a redesign prepare for its upcoming project?
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. So the first step that you want to take when thinking of a website redesign is taking a moment to check the current state of things. So take a look at your branding, see if you're happy with your current logo, the colors that you're using, the fonts you're using, the way you use images, your tone of voice, everything that's related to the way that your organization is presenting itself to the outside world. Just take a moment to think about that and see if you're happy with it or if you need to make any changes. Just take a moment to do that as the first step. And then once you know that you're happy with your branding, just take a look at what you want for the new site. Try to think who's your audience. And when you're thinking about audience, it isn't like a census. So maybe don't think about like a certain age, gender, or location. Try to think more about the things that your audience care about. Like try to think what do these people consume on a day-to-day basis on like social media? What other organizations do they look at? What do they do for work? Internally we do personas for this, and can be a next nice exercise to make. But yeah, just try to think who you're speaking to and how your website can resonate with them. And also think about the goals of your new website. So like doing a website redesign is not a goal in itself, but it's a means to an end. So think what's your goal? For example, if your organization is very big on donations and you really care about receiving donations, then that's going to be the main call to action, the big red button that's on your website. You want to focus on that. Or maybe if you're more into getting people to volunteer, then focus on that. Just try to set your goals and how you're going to be measuring those goals. Like, is it going to be based on page views or clicks on a certain section, or I don't know, whatever you think your audience will care about and whatever you want your website to say about you. And also think about your current site, and if there's anything on your site that you want to keep, if you think, for example, that you have a section that's very nice, or you like the way that the text is written, you want to keep that. Or maybe you have other sections that were fine in the beginning, but with time you added more stuff to it, and now it's kind of hard to use. So try to identify like what are the things you like about your current site and what you don't like about it, so that you know what things you want to keep and what things you would like to change. There's a lot of tools available online. They're called Jamboards. If you use Figma, you have Pixam. There's Miro too. There are many tools available online that you and your team can use to like brainstorm and like share your opinion about this, to make sure you're all like on the same page about the website redesign. And at the same time, take a look at what other organizations are doing. Like, do you like what others are doing? What don't you like about them? Try to think of like a Pinterest board. It doesn't necessarily have to be Pinterest, but try to visualize what you want your website to look like, and maybe the things that you want to stay away from too. Working on your own branding can be very hard. I'm saying this as a designer, that working for others is a lot easier than working on yourself. So just take the time to really think about where things are right now and where you want to go. And then finally, once you know all this, just start gathering any branding assets that you have. If you have logos, if you have branding guidelines, any other marketing materials, maybe you have business cards that are not related to the website, but you want to see that vibe on your site. Just gather anything that you think is going to be helpful for our team, if we're working together, to understand where you want to go. And so that way we make sure we're all on the same page and we're using your branding correctly, your fonts, your colors, everything. And that, yeah, to make sure that both all of your team and ours are on the same page about where we want to go with this redesign.
Thank you, Catalina. Now that we know how to prepare for the design process, let's delve into the technical realm. As the Chief Information Officer, what are some of the technical aspects to consider before a website redesign? Wasim?
Thanks, Emily. That's another good question. And talking about technical stuff, it's usually the most boring thing of any website redesign projects. Catalina works on the fun part, which is the design and the animations and how everything looks cute and nice. Seth like manages everything like the content strategy and how everything is connected, and my team manages all of the boring backend things that people never talk about, which is the technical things that people need to consider. But after all, it's a website, it's a technology piece, right? So we need to have solid plan before you or when you start thinking about your website redesign. Number one, just like the anything else, we kind of like highlight priorities, like on high priorities on things you need to consider and think about. Number one is the CMS, the content management system consideration. Are you using a CMS at the moment? If you are using it, are you considering switching to another one? If you are considering switching to another one, there is like a whole planning that needs to be considered before you move forward.
Wasim, sorry to
yes,
interrupt, but
sure.
could we maybe just define what a CMS is really quick?
Absolutely. Yeah,
think some
yeah.
people may not
So
know.
yeah, cool. So CMS, stands for Content Management System. It's basically a piece, it's a system that will let you add, edit, manage your content, which is your web pages, from one interface. So without a CMS, you will need to ask someone to create a page and publish that page for you. A CMS, a content management system, is this tool set that let you manage all of the content on your website for you. One very famous CMS is WordPress. That's one of the top most used CMS in the world. There's Drupal. There are like a lot of other ones. So you're working with most of, like nowadays, most of the organizations we work with or we partner with do have some kind of a CMS. Very rare when they don't use the CMS. So yeah, so the CMS selection is very, very, very critical, not only technically, but also capacity, because you will need, by the end of the day, you will need your team to manage content on your website. By managing content, I mean like editing on a daily basis, publishing a newsletter, a press release, uploading a PDF, stuff like that. So you want your team to be comfortable with that. Then another, like, one of the quote unquote one of the most complicated, technically speaking, pieces on a website redesign, on any website redesign, is what we call content migration. That's specifically for websites with a lot of contents. If you have like 5-6 pages, like landing pages, it's not a big deal. You can just like get the contents for those pages and create them on the new website. It gets complicated when you have, let's say, 10+ years worth of like resource libraries. Could be like blog entries, could be reports that your organization working on. So the complexity of that is few things. One is, if you are switching your CMS, the system that managing that, it gets complicated. So you need a solid migration plan for that. And the second part of it is the content strategy, is like, whatever taxonomy you have in place at the moment, are you going to use the same taxonomy? And most of the time you don't. So you need kind of like a better taxonomy to make sure that people, once again, answering one of the initial questions we have is, people cannot find content on your website, and like 9 out of 10 is because of taxonomy, because it's so not planned properly to start with. Then the other like technical, like, as kind of like 3 and 4 like in one thing, is one is any third-party integration, because most of the website nowadays, it's not like a standalone website. You need or to use third-party integrations, like donation forms, or donation forms, for instance, right? You're not going to create a donation forms and processing the donations from scratch. It just does not make any sense. So you need to integrate a donation platform. Could be, I don't know, there's like a lot of them. Could be Engaging Network, could be a lot, like few of them that works exclusively with nonprofits.
Every Action is another big
Every
one.
Action is another one. Yeah. So you want to integrate that. So you want to consider like how to integrate that. Is it going to be like a seamless integration? Kind of like you just need the plan for integration. Then there is also like the CRM. Are you using, quote unquote, Salesforce or different kind of CRM that you want to integrate? And that's very important when you are collecting contact info for like newsletter, for instance, right? Could go for donations too, but like CRM is the other thing. And then last not least is your web hosting environment, what we call home. Sweet home is that where your website is, right? What is like residing. You want to do, that's like a lot of like very boring technical stuff. Like you want to make sure it's secure, it's fast, it's reliable, all of that cool stuff. So, and why, like, just one thing kind of like related to this question, but also to the 2 previous questions Emily asked, is all of this is a lot to do on your own. And also like, it's just, you need a process for that. We do have, and I believe other agencies do the same, is we do have a lot of these exercises already. We would help with that. So you can't do all of this on your own. It's just, it's just going to be too hard. So just want to mention that. And I know, Seth, you're going to talk about that in a bit, but I just want to mention, like, I don't want to scare anyone. This is like 5 billion things to do. We're not going to do a website redesign until like 2060 or something. Yeah. So, as I said, I don't know about other agencies, but we will support all of the we support all the organization we work with plan on how to address all of these things we just discussed.
Yeah, that is a really great point, right? Like, we are here to talk about
Yeah.
what you can do to prepare, but a lot of this is really optional, right? Like, whatever you don't know what you don't know until you
Correct.
really get into the process. But having some of the things like what your CMS is going to be, who your web hosting platform is, are you happy with them? Are things you can be thinking about now that'll help us really hit the ground running when we do start working together.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm just going to pause for a second. If you have any questions, please put it in the Q&A section, or you can post it in the chat, and we'll answer your questions at the end of the webinar. All right. All right. This is a question for everyone. For many organizations, the most time-consuming part of the redesign process is determining what content to include on the new site. Is it important for anyone contemplating a website redesign to begin working on content before the project begins? And Seth, you go ahead.
Yeah, well, the short answer to that is yes, definitely. It's a good idea. Again, it's not one of those necessary things, but it is a good idea to start thinking about the content on your website, because thinking about like what you want your website to say is just as important as how you want it to look. Thinking about it before you start in on the process can help you guys. You all just sort of think about the own scope, like I mentioned earlier, with like what everyone's bandwidth is going to be. It'll help you think about sort of like how much room you're going to have to rewrite the about page or to update the sitemap, as Catalina mentioned, and really think about what pieces you want to dive deep. And it's definitely going to help craft that scope of work that I mentioned earlier too. It's also going to help you think about the timeline overall, given your own bandwidth relative to the rest of the project. And in general, it's just a really good opportunity to check in on some of your evergreen content, right? That about page or your mission statement, or like even your homepage, right? Like, a lot of times we try and have a really like live and modular homepage, but a lot of times that does get a little static. And so updating it, thinking about what we want to say, especially for a page like the homepage that is probably almost certainly our top most visited page, thinking really critically about what it says and how it says, how it conveys the information about the organization is a really important thing to start in on early. Of course, we'll talk about it together, but it's part of those conversations that you can start having now.
Yeah, and something that I would like to add to that is that in terms of design, we will say that form follows function, and it really applies to web design. So if we have all your content, or at least an idea of what your content is going to look like at the start of the process, it's going to really help speed things up and make sure that we are designing something that really fits your needs. For example, if you know that a page is going to have certain sections, then we can design around that, rather than designing something and then just showing it to you and making changes. If we know like what the content looks like at the start, it will really help us align with your needs.
So I know we're just saying this, like, it's helpful and that form does follow function, but like that content doesn't need to be final, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't need to be completely final. The more final as you can get it, the better. But if you just don't know, or you need more time to, like, for example, a section is going to have a title and a paragraph, and you need more time to write that paragraph, that's completely fine. We can just use Lorem Ipsum and use that until you get the final content. But when we do have the content at the beginning, we can like play around with it a bit. For example, I'm gonna give a very silly example, but if you have a heading that's something like, for a blog post, like 10 reasons to do volunteer work, and you have an image of a person doing like this, then you can put those two together and kind of generate like a new interesting meaning. If we don't have it, we can totally still design around it. But it just adds a little bit more, the more finalists you can get it.
Thanks. Go ahead, Wasim.
I was just I was just thinking, like, I can't remember who said like content is king. I believe it's Bill Gates, but I could be wrong. Or the other guy, what is the Apple guy? I forget his name.
Steve
Steve
Jobs.
Jobs.
Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs. One of them, I forget who said like content is king for a good reason. Maybe it's Steve Jobs. I can't remember, but that to answer the question, yes, you need to think about the content is one of the most important things on any website, right? So other than what Catalina and Seth mentioned, from a technical standpoint, one of the things we need to really make a solid plan for is, once again, related to the migration. If we want to do content migration, is a content audit, right? We want to have, usually we get a list of all of the content, all of the pages, all of the posts, all of the press releases, blogs, that kind of stuff, and then list them in a way that it's in a way to have an idea of like how things are interconnected. That leads to the taxonomy, like which taxonomy we have in the page on the existing website, and then from there we try to sort and filter where the new content is going to be. Do we need, for instance, to archive? Let's say we have like 10 plus years old reports. Do we want to quote unquote archive those? If we want to archive them, how are we going to archive them? Then if we have some content that is actually we don't need anymore, maybe we should just like delete. That's kind of like a lot of kind of like the technical preparation that's really needs to be considered before while you're working on your content. Yep.
Great. Thank you so much. Catalina, you've worked with many organizations where you've refreshed brands and created style guides for website redesigns. Should an organization refresh its brand before it starts a redesign?
I would say it depends on the case. So you can have two scenarios, right? You can have a scenario where you're very happy with your current branding. Maybe you did it recently or you did it a long time ago, but it still works for your organization. Then in that case, I wouldn't say it's necessary to do a rebranding for your website. We can adapt to whatever you have. Even if your branding guidelines doesn't include anything specifically for web, we can work around it and we can, just be flexible and adapt to whatever branding that you already have. But in case that you're looking at your branding and you feel there's some things you would like to change or you're not happy with it, or maybe it just doesn't resonate with you or your audience anymore, then in that case, I would recommend just taking a few moments to take a look at your brand and decide what are the things that you would like to change and just change them. If it's very small changes, we can do it while we do the website. But if it's bigger changes, like for example, let's say you want to change all your brand colors or your logo or your fonts, then in that case, I would recommend you do that before the actual website redesign, because it's always easier to do the website around your branding than adapting your branding to what you have on your site.
Thank you. Wasim, what are some of the technical challenges that organizations have when they come to Indie Tech Solutions for a website redesign?
Once again, talking about the boring technical stuff. Yes.
Important but boring.
Important but boring. Thank you. Yes. I will come back again to the content strategy, and number one challenge with a lot of website redesign needs is visitors cannot find anything on our website. That 9 once again out of 10 is connected to your content strategy, is like the taxonomy of your website, like how everything is connected. When I search for something, does it list content that is related to that post article, for instance? When I search, does the search feature really show the results I'm looking for? So content strategy and taxonomy, that's like one of the first technical challenges all, if not most, if not all, organizations are facing. So you want to mention something?
And making
Yeah.
sure that, yeah, please, if you don't mind. And it's not just like finding the content, but finding the relevant content too, right? And
Correct.
so sometimes it's like you have this article that might show up early on in like the search results, but it's from 2009, right? It's from like 3 websites ago, and you're not sure what to do with it. I don't know if you know, is there a technical solution for that, or is it more of a, you know, a content strategy question?
Correct. Then the other kind of like one of like 100% technical is very slow website, very bad user experience. Like I click on this, it's not almost not functional, right? Like functionality. We added this thing, we implemented this feature, and it's just not working. This is all front end when people like your visitors, which is worse, like the live website, when people go to your website and submitting a form to join your email list and then they get an error, right? That's most of the time just like technical quick fixes sometimes it's like more structural, needs a lot more updates. And then the third thing I want to think about is integration with third party, like external services. Once again, like donation forms, which is like very important because depending on your organization's CTA, like call to action on the website, could be donations. If you're integrating a donation form that is not working or not doing it right, that's like maybe worst thing ever. The other thing is like, once again, like you are in like your CTA is to get contact info email list to join your email list, and then it's not working. So all of like functionalities, features of the website that is not really functional, that's like a red flag. Big no, you will lose visitors, they were not gonna come back, and it's just bad experience.
Yeah, I'll just add to that too, because I think that it is important to recognize, you know, there are certain technical limitations with like certain third-party integrations that like don't let you maybe embed or integrate, but that doesn't mean that we can't make it really smart. And that's where it comes back to like the content strategy and the user interface, and just like making sure that like, okay, if you have to go to another website to donate, do you know that? Like, do you know that you're leaving the website? Make sure that it opens in a new tab. Little things like that can make a really big difference. In addition to like, you know, we'll do everything that we can to make sure that it's a smart, seamless experience and easy to manage. But if we can't do that, if there are technical limitations, you can still work around that in really smart ways with that content strategy, with that UI, UX and experience.
Great. Seth, the next question's for you. Taking a step back, you mentioned breaking out a website project into phases. If a nonprofit doesn't have the budgetary concerns, do they still need to do this?
That's a really good question. I think it is a good idea. Well, yeah, I think the short answer again is yes. I do think that it's really smart when you are going through a redesign to take a step back and think about what those need to haves and nice to haves are. It really does help to define the project, and it really, really can help you craft your RFP or your request for proposals. And so when you start in on something like that, you can really think about, okay, well, this is something, you know, having that donation form embedded on the website, that might be a need to have if donations are really important to you. But if it's not the most important thing, then it might be a nice to have, right? And so then we can maybe put it off to a little bit later or not include it in the project scope. And that'll really help define the project. But talking a little bit more about the RFP process, you know, starting at the beginning with a few different things will really help to not only define the project for us or for any firm that you submit a website redesign proposal for, but it'll help you define the project scope too. So there are a few things that we really like to see in a RFP that I just want to mention really quick. That's like defining some concepts. Like we want a prettier modern site, right? Like that's a concept. That's not really this is a thing that's on the ground that like we need because our development team is asking for it, right? You want more prevalent calls to action. That might be something that your development team is asking for that is really important for you to drive a certain audience in a way versus another. So I think that is another option, idea there. And if you did update your branding recently, or if you do went through a strategy update, you have a new strategic plan rather, and you want to integrate that into the website, that's something that you can define from the outset that'll give us idea of what's most important. And then there are those practicalities, some of those technical things that Wasim mentioned a bit ago, like updating your categories for a new resource library, or embedding your donation form or the sign up form. Those technical pieces do often make up an important part of the scope of the project. And are often where we as a redesign firm need to devote a few more resources. And then it's thinking about some of those KPIs, those key performance indicators that Catalina mentioned. Those ones I think are super, super important. And it's often something that like, I'm honestly surprised by this, but when you do go through a redesign process, I think that so often you don't think about how you define success for the project, right? Like what will a successful redesign project mean for you? And so having that be tied to something like an increase in page views, or an increase in time on page if you want people to be reading your reports, or an increase in donations, right? If we, really bumped up our call to action for donations, and we see a dramatic spike in donations after that, that's great. So those are the sorts of things that we should keep an eye on. And if we can define those before we even get the project underway, we can really, really know what success will look like for the project, which is just a great thing for everybody to be on the same page for when we get started.
Okay. Let's move into the questions. If anyone has any additional questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. Our first question is from Alexis. Hi, we've just launched our redesign project and we're in the process of developing a strategy for accessibility. We're a state agency, so wide accessibility for all languages and physical mental abilities is a high priority. Any advice on how to approach such a strategy?
I think we can probably talk about this, right? Like,
Yeah, you can. It's up to you. Say you can start. I can start, but yeah, you can start. Go ahead.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, accessibility is such an important part of the redesign of any website, right? And it's honestly not just like installing UserWay, like no shade to them, but like installing an accessibility plugin on your website and like hoping for the best, right? It's a lot of different things. It's having a smart taxonomy that makes it easy to jump around from thing to thing. It's making sure that your sitemap is clear and all that. It's making sure that your color contrasts are good, right? So I'm gonna let Catalina talk about that piece a little bit more, but it's having a smart accessibility strategy is built into the redesign process at every stage. It's not just as simple as installing a plugin and hoping for the best. So I could keep talking.
Just one thing that I'd like to add to that, as that said. So accessibility is something that you want to keep in mind throughout the whole process. So I know there's a lot of things that are related to accessibility that are for when you implement the site, right? Like, for example, having alt text for images and all that stuff. But there are some things that you can do earlier on, like in the design stage. For example, making sure that you have enough color contrast, making sure that font sizes are legible. Just try to keep in mind as if you go through every step of the website redesign, try to keep accessibility in mind, because it's much more easier to do it that way than getting to the end of the process and then going back and looking like, okay, is this accessible? Do I need to make changes? Just keeping it as you're working will really help.
Yeah, I will add a couple of things. So one is I know, Alexis, you said you just launched the redesign project. I'm not sure if you if it was part of the redesign project to work on the accessibility, both the visual, like the graphic, like elements, but also functionalities, features of the website. But now, like, and we get this question all the time about accessibility for existing website. Now the website has been launched. Few things to consider. One is there are different guidelines for accessibility, and each guideline is specific to your need. Most of nonprofit, they will go with what we call the WCAG. It's like one guideline to follow with specific instructions and steps to follow to make your website accessible. Then for each organization has specific needs. Is you need to engage your stakeholders, like a subset of users that you want to engage and do an ongoing testing, like accessibility testing with them, right? Because you want to prioritize what accessibility features you want to implement in the website. Obviously, you want to do like all of them, but it's an ongoing process, right? Then the third part is like the language support. That's in my opinion is the easiest one to do, is to implement just kind of like multilingual. There are two ways to do it. We highly always recommend, if you have the capacity, if you have the budget, to have human translated content for your website for whatever language. But there are, we know a lot of organizations don't have the capacity or the budget to do that for the specific languages they are targeting. There could be some automated tools that you could use. We don't highly recommend them, but sometimes it's better than nothing. Sometimes it's not. It all depends which language you're using. So,
And
so yeah, so I
Wasim,
will,
on the,
yeah,
sorry, on the language piece too,
sure.
definitely if you need to, like in Alexis's case, if you need to support many languages, you probably do need to automate it. But some of the plugins that I've seen before will actually let you do that. But then as a paid feature, you can go in and edit those translations too. So that's kind of the best of both worlds, right? Where you have it,
Sure.
you have your boxes checked, right? You are being accessible in terms of like how many languages you support. And if you have the capacity to like go through and reread it and make sure it makes sense and it's comprehensible in these other languages, and then you can edit if it's not, even better.
Yeah. So now I think like next steps maybe for you, Alexis, is to really conduct a test and accessibility or test or audit of the existing website that will tell you like all of the accessibility issues or challenges on the existing website. Then, as I said, once again, you need to know, like, engage your stakeholders and prioritize which features you want to implement on an ongoing basis to address all of those accessibility features. So an audit, engage your stakeholders, identify those accessibility features, and then obviously implement them on an ongoing basis. It is an ongoing process. It's not like fix it now and forget about it. So,
We could totally have a webinar just on accessibility. Like
yes.
it's a very big question.
Yep.
Catalina, this just reminded me what there are tools, right, that'll let you check accessibility for websites. Are there any that you recommend?
Yeah, there are many. So there's two types of tools. There are the tools that will check your actual website. There's this Wave extension for Chrome that's really good. And also there's many plugins in Figma that will let you test accessibility too. Depending on what type of test that you want to make, you can choose different plugins. There are plugins that will simulate how different people will see the same like the same colors, how people with different types of vision will see them. That can also help a lot. There's also a tool online for checking color contrast. You can enter the value and it will tell you if it's accessible or not. There are many available tools online, again, as I said, like for checking the actual design before you implement, as well as after you've implemented the website. But as Wasim said, it all comes down to who your audience is. And like, for example, if you're speaking to an audience that, I don't know, has a particular, I don't know, challenge, you can tailor that accessibility audit to them specifically.
Great, thank you for the question. Next question, does Indie Tech redesign brands? Catalina?
So normally, most of the partners we work with already have their branding, so we haven't really come to a point where we need to do a rebrand from scratch. What we do is sometimes brands, as I said before, like sometimes they do have a branding, but it's not flexible enough to accommodate for being used on a website. Or maybe there are some tweaks that they need to make to the branding that doesn't affect other parts of the brand, but does affect the website. So in those cases, what we do is like, I would say we don't do rebranding, but we do expand on what brands already have. So for example, as I said, like let's say your brand has a limited color palette and you need more colors to use on your website, we can totally do that.
Great, thank you so much. Seth, this question's for you. How do organizations drive more of their target audience to their website?
That is a great question, right? Because like we can talk about this, we can go through this whole process, but if nobody sees our website after that, then like, kind of what are we doing here, right? So, one thing that I really think about a lot from a content strategy, from a digital strategy standpoint, is the fact that your website doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? Like your website is just one part of your web presence. And so that's really where it gets back to a lot of what Catalina was talking about with your audiences. So identifying who your audiences are, who your potential audiences are, and then thinking about how they may arrive on your website, if that is the most important thing that you want them to do. So oftentimes a website redesign will come alongside sorry, I'm blanking here. Website redesign will come alongside a new email marketing campaign, right? Like you have this really good subscriber list and you really want people to donate, then, hit that list hard and make them come to your website, encourage them to come to your website rather. And then you can, kind of guide them towards that donation option. It ultimately comes back to that key performance indicator or KPI question again, like what are the important things that you want people to do? And then, if it is a target audience, one that you don't necessarily have yet, having a good SEO strategy is really important too, right? Like making sure that you're ranking well on Google is something that's really important part of our redesign process. So we'll help provide you with some tools. I should say we often help provide some tools that really make sure that your certain audiences that might be searching for certain terms or things like that they're going to come across your website first. So it's a really good question. It's a really big question. But I guess I should have started with the short answer, and the short answer is really thinking about what your website is doing as part of your larger online strategy, how it relates to your email marketing, how it relates to your presence online on search engines, and how it relates to your social media, and thinking about where those target audiences are first interacting with you, and then what they might want to see to be enticed to come to the website.
Right. And last question, Wasim, you specialize in website security. What are some of the challenges that nonprofit organizations face with security?
A lot, everything. Not only nonprofit, but like a lot of website security is like a crucial component. Security is like a scary word, and people like don't want to deal with it. Oh, our website is hacked. I don't know how to do it. But there are like very few basic things that I recommend to all of the organizations we work with. We do like have our own like custom security packages that we offer, but if you want to do it on your own or like working with other people, very few basic things that every organization should do. Number one, since most of the organizations are using WordPress, is updates your WordPress. That means the WordPress core, like the CMS, and also your plugins. Just update them on a regular basis, because 90+% of the hacking, successful hacking attempts is on an outdated plugin or an outdated WordPress. So that's the bare minimum you should do. That will avoid most of the security issues you would have. Number two, that's an easy thing to do, is your passwords for your admin accounts. Please don't use password 123. Please don't use password 1. Just use something.
No admin.
No admin. Oh, that's another one. Admin, or yeah, please just try to have strong passwords. Number three, try as much as possible. I know it sometimes is tricky, is to avoid having 25 admin on your websites. That's never, because it's just like opens the doors for more vulnerability that you shouldn't, you can easily avoid. Yeah, that's like the top three. There is, as I mentioned, with a lot of things here, we could have like one session just to talk about that. So
Oh, great. Thank you so
Mhm.
much.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope this was helpful and a fun discussion. We're going to host our next webinar on May 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. The webinar is called Design Concepts and Content Creation Strategy, What to Consider Before Your Next Website Redesign. You're going to gain valuable insights from our lead designer and director of digital strategy on the design and content strategy process. We hope you can make it. I also put my email in the chat, so if you need to get a hold of us, please email me or go to our website and fill out the contact form, and we'll be sure to get right back to you. Thanks everyone again. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We really appreciate your time, and we all hope you have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Emily.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.